So we're going to focus on 10 questions to ask the IEP team. And this is from a parent perspective. So you should have a couple documents in front of you. The first is the PowerPoint with an area to take notes. And then you also have a note-taking guide for your thoughts and possibly any other questions that you might have. The other thing that you have in front of you is your legal-sized sheet that says educational benefit and the aligned IEP. I'd like you to turn that over. And what you'll find is questions within each one of the categories specific to questions you can ask at the IEP team, whether it's about standards, instruction, assessment, present levels, questions that will help make the connection and help deepen your understanding of how the IEP is being created. And when we look at the questions for families and guardians to ask, I just wanted to draw your attention to a few of them. The first one is within the standards, starting with the first bullet point. What grade level standard is the goal aligned to? So I want you to keep that in mind, that when you're writing your goals and objectives, there has to be a reference to a grade level standard. And it's a different context. Many times when we write goals and objectives, we look at the assessment information and then we move it forward a little bit to write our goal. Is that familiar, that process? Look at the assessment, look at the present levels, and then move the goal just a little bit farther so that it shows that the student's making progress. The difference in the context is this. At grade level standards apply to all students. Our context now is to take the assessment information, the present levels, look at the goal, the grade level standard, look at the grade level standard and choose which grade level standard would be appropriate for the student to work toward. And then write your goal in alignment. So it changes the context so that you're looking forward to the future and where the student is progressing, not where the student is, and we want them to move. See the difference in context? Okay, so those are the kinds of questions that you'll find in this document. Question number 1. In order for my child to receive educational benefit, how are the contents of this IEP connected to the previous IEP? You're looking back at the previous IEP to make sure that you're creating a bridge from the previous IEP to the current IEP. Okay, sometimes that's a context that's mixed. Which grade level standards are the goal aligned to? We just talked about that. Grade level is looking forward, present level is looking at current. How are you making that connection so that the student is moving forward? Question 3, in what ways will this IEP lead to independence in college, career, civic life, post-secondary success? Not just the year that the IEP is in effect. You're making the connection from year to year to year. So let's put that into a frame. Currently, we're going to go back. We're going to look at the previous IEP. We're going to create the current IEP with an eye toward leaving our system. That's your progression. Okay? How are my child's goals, needs, supports, and adaptations communicated to other staff members who provide instruction? This is huge. And don't just think in terms of teachers. Who else needs the information? Is there a paraeducator involved? What about the playground supervisors? What about the after-school staff? Here's a good one. What about the bus driver? Think about the bus driver. That's like a teacher with their back turned to the class on wheels, right? And then we don't give them the information they need. They need the information. Who's communicating the information so that we don't have a bigger accident on the bus than needs to be? So this is a huge question. Can you clarify? Do not be afraid to ask for clarification. Special ed is a very specific vocabulary and a very specific process. So we have to make sure that everyone can function as the IEP team as an equal member. Is there a goal written for every area of need identified in the present levels of performance? One-to-one correlation, remember we talked about that. I should see an area of need, I should see a goal. Are the goals measurable and lead toward independence? This one, here's your frame. The goals have to be observable and measurable, and do they lead to independence? Meaning, when the year starts, the student is able to do whatever the goal, whatever the expectation is, more independently than when we started. Because what happens is that we have goals that continue the same throughout, and the student doesn't show progress, and they leave our system with the same level of need. Another way to look at that is in terms of supports and services. If I, as the student, have a paraeducator assigned to me as support, and there's never a fade plan toward independence, that paraeducator leaves when I leave the system. So if I'm unable to function at any level in college and career, whatever my next placement is going to be, if I'm unable to function without that level of support, I've been done a disservice because the paraeducator is not going to be there. And one thing I look for is that when directions are given by a teacher and the student looks at the paraeducator to figure out what am I supposed to do now? And the paraeducator jumps in and does it. My next question was, what's the fade plan there? We have to get that student, and remember we said executive functioning skills are important. Executive functioning skills are what the students have to access in order to take their next steps and make a decision on how to move forward with meeting the expectation. So really ask this question toward independence. How are we pulling back on those supports appropriately? What percentage of the day will my child be removed from the general education setting? I want to know that because when my child leaves the system, there will be no self-contained classes. Might be sheltered work environment. There's going to be a percentage of their time that they're going to have to learn how to work within the general education environment outside of our system. There's not going to be a special day class, not going to be paraeducators. There's not going to be any types of supports that look the same as when they're in our system. So they're going to have to learn by the time they leave our system how to function without those supports. If we don't lead to that level of independence or have that long-range perspective in mind, we're going to be in a heap of trouble. What services and supports are necessary for my child to make progress toward goals? Be educated with his or her peers as much as possible and be an independent learner. So what supports are necessary, and how are we looking at pulling back so we're creating independence? That's your context there. What does the child currently need? How are we going to pull them back? And at what level can we pull them back? At what level of speed can we pull them back in order to create the independence so that they're not dependent on me, on another person. They're able to make their own decisions. They're able to function on their own. How will my child's progress be monitored, and at what intervals will I be notified? That's your progress monitoring piece. We don't know throughout that year. If I don't receive reports on progress monitoring toward goals and objectives, I won't know whether or not the child's moving forward. It's going to be too late, and it's going to be a wasted year. One to grow on. What can I do at home to support my child in meeting his or her goals? Great question to ask in an IEP meeting. What can I do to support school? What can I offer? How can we make the connection? How can we collaborate? Doesn't it make more sense if child's receiving the same type of instruction, the same type of information at school that they are at home? They're able to make that connection. It's like double duty. Okay? And then a question for you. What are additional questions you might ask the IEP team? I know you have some really, really good questions, either as a parent or I've been in many IEP teams where the parents asked amazing questions. Start a bank. Start a bank of questions. You can start with these 10, but really come prepared for questions to ask so that you understand exactly what's happening at the IEP and how we make those connections. Because when the child leaves the system, it's going to be on the parent. I don't know if you've seen I think it was on Nightline, where they followed two parents of young men with autism. Is that ringing a bell? And they were graduating, so they were in their 22nd year, and they had many supports and services in the school system, and it followed these two mothers on the last year trying to access supports for their sons because they knew that they were going to leave and the supports were going to be ceased. And it's a really, really clear picture of why we need to make sure that students are connected to post-secondary in that transition piece, but also that they have the independent skills so they're not reliant and dependent on parents or supports more than they need to be.